So for this project, we're going to make what's called an edge-lit acrylic sign. You can see this is one here that I've made with a different project. This one involves coding and 3D printing, and we're not going to do that for this project, but you can see how this works. Basically, there is a red light in the bottom of this piece of clear acrylic, and you can't see the red light in the parts of the acrylic that are still smooth, but in the areas where it's been roughed up, this has been laser engraved, it catches the red light and it shines quite nicely. So the most common place that you would have seen this is if you look around and you find the nearest exit sign in whatever building you're in, it's probably an edge-lit acrylic sign, just a piece of acrylic hanging down from a wall bracket that has a green or a red light in it, and the word exit is lit up, and that's a piece of acrylic that's been engraved so that the word exit shows up. So we're going to make one of those by hand, which is a little bit different than how this one was made. So we're going to start out by designing our sign before we do any of the electronics. And so what we need is one of these pieces of acrylic. You're going to need some tape, some sandpaper, and this is also sandpaper, but it comes in a very small stick form. It's called a sanding twig. First thing that we want to do with our acrylic is that it has a couple of pieces of protective plastic on it. And so if you sort of work your fingernail along the top corner, you can find the edge of that plastic and peel it off. And we're really only going to work on one side for right now, and just to avoid accidentally scratching our acrylic, we're going to leave the clear protective layer on the other side. Now there's a few ways that you can actually create your design on this acrylic. One is to use a masking tape, and masking tape hence is named because we're going to mask off certain areas, and then we're going to sand, and then we peel that tape off, it's going to leave the areas that we put the tape on nice and smooth. So if we do that, whatever we put the tape on is not going to be lit up, and whatever we don't put the tape on and we sand is going to be roughed up, and we'll take whatever color LED we're going to put in there. We can also just work freehand, and you can use the sandpaper to create a pattern or a design, and then you can also use these sanding twigs and almost like drawing onto the surface of the acrylic. And so I'm going to demonstrate a couple of the options, and the first thing that I'm going to do is mask off a letter. Now we can make our sign so that it stands up like that, and we can also make our sign so that it stands up like that. So the first thing you want to do is figure out, do you want it to be in landscape? Say if you were going to put a name, or if it was going to go vertical, then you could put a letter or a shape or a design or something. So I'm going to start out with some tape. We also have some stencil film that you can cut into a shape if you want, but I'm going to work with some masking tape, and I'm actually going to take my scissors. I want this to be a little bit thinner, so I'm going to cut my masking tape down the middle. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my last initial. And what we can do is just layer the tape on top of each other, and as long as we don't leave gaps between, we can match tape up. You know, I didn't quite get all the way. I want to make a Z here, so I'm going to take some more tape and continue the middle part of my Z. And I'll do the same thing here. Need a little bit more on my Z. It's just a little bit shorter on the bottom than on the top. So I'm just going to take this and I'll stick that in there. So that's a pretty good Z. I'm going to leave a little chunk at the bottom because we're going to use this as a stand. So you don't want your design to go all the way down to the bottom, or if you're going this way, you'll have a little bit of a spot in the middle where you want to leave it clear. So you want to leave some space down at the bottom of your design. But you can go pretty far down. I think I can go further down than that. So I'm going to, I think, cut some triangles out of my masking tape here. And I can make some little things that are kind of like stars by layering a couple of pieces of masking tape together. I think I want one of those to be a little bit longer. And maybe I want some more little points on there, so it's going to be a mini pointed star. And so by laying small shapes together, simple shapes, you can actually make fairly complex shapes. I think that's pretty good. I could add, oh, actually, I kind of like this. I got this little design right here. So I'm going to maybe make a little bit of my Z that goes like that. And now I need to make another one of those. All right, so you can see, made a decent little design here. And from basic shapes, right? Ripped up pieces of sort of triangles and long rectangles and other things that I've got. Now I'm ready to turn this into my design. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this rough piece of sandpaper. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sand all the areas. Now I can go up to the edge of my masking tape and get a little bit on the edge of my masking tape, and it's going to protect that area, which is what the masking tape is there for. I don't want to go crazy on the masking tape because it's not super strong, and I could actually tear it and scrape into the area that I want to stay clear. So I'm going to do my best to, go right up to that masking tape, but not really rough up the masking tape a ton. So I've left some areas around here, and I'm going to deal with those in a second, but I've also wanted to just make sure that I looked, and if there are any spots where it looks like I haven't sanded a whole lot, you can see this corner, it's got some areas that doesn't feel like I've sanded it too much. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I've gotten that, and sometimes changing direction, if I went that way to begin with, I can do a little bit going this way. It's going to make a little bit more of a smooth effect on your design. And it's easier to do that before you've peeled off your masking tape. So you can just sort of look it over and see, does it look nice and smooth? Have I gotten up to the masking tape in all the spots where I want to? And now it's time to get some detail. So this is where my my sanding stick comes in. And this is kind of like an emery board. If you're working at home, you can use an emery board for this project. But now I'm going to get into those detail spots around my star. I don't want the little points of the star to come off. So I'm going to just use this to get in there. These are much more delicate, so you wouldn't want to use it for the entire process. One, it would take a lot longer, and two, eventually the sandpaper will start to wear off and get smooth and not really do much in the way of sanding. And if it does do that, it starts feeling like, oh, that's not really very gritty anymore. I'm just gonna cut that bit off. Now I've got a new rougher spot at the end of my sanding stick. I'm gonna get into all of my little stars here. And you could see how, if you wanted to, you could use this to draw something freehand, right? You wouldn't even need to use masking tape if you didn't want to. Masking tape just gives you a little bit more control. But some people may really like to just sort of draw freehand and come up with designs, patterns, whatever. And the sanding sticks can really help that happen. And obviously, the more detailed your design is, you can see it's taken me as long to do these 3 stars with all their little points and holes and things as it took me to do the entire rest of the design. So you can see that the more detailed you make your creation, the longer it'll take, but the more it'll be worth it in the end if you really like your design. All right, looking pretty good. Now comes the fun part. I get to grab my masking tape and start peeling it up to reveal my design, which already is starting to look pretty cool even without the light. And if I want to, let's say, this star kind of lost a little bit of its detail, I can come in with my sanding stick and create some of that detail that seems to have gotten a little lost. There it is. This is my engraved or etched acrylic that's going to make the sign part of my edge lit sign. And we'll get into the electrical part of this in the next video.